What an extraordinary person to kick off this day of collaboration and exchange of ideas. And we would really love today to hear from you in terms of your insights into priorities around giving, strategies, and of course, as we were talking earlier, lessons learned. But I wanted to start off on the Leadership Academy in South Africa. Many, many years before that, you were so involved in a wide range of philanthropic endeavors dedicated to education. Why did you decide to take such a meaningful stake in that effort? And what was the journey like for you?
Boy, okay. First of all, let me just say, I think it's really great. As I was getting dressed this morning, almost wearing that dress, I thought how really outstanding it is that all of you, myself included, would gather together, all people who are trying to do good work in the world, would gather together at a conference, would give of your time and your energy and your thought process to trying to not only do good, but to have the good you do work for the better through collaboration. So I think we all deserve a high five for that. I think wherever people are
gathered, give ourselves a round of applause.
I think wherever people are gathered in the name of trying to become a force for something that is good and meaningful, only good will come out of it. So I'm really excited about the possibilities of what will come when all of this energy comes together and we collaborate to say, not quite sure what will come from it, but you know that something good will come from it. I think that true philanthropy comes from the heart of yourself. And growing up as a poor girl, I mean really poor, not just not having wonderful economic circumstances or material things, but literally poor, like no running water kind of poor. And having education being the road to freedom for me. My grandmother only finished 3rd grade, but taught me to read the Bible, so I grew up knowing how to read and put myself in the position of, by the time I got to kindergarten, I knew all the biblical names from the Christian Bible. So in kindergarten, I wrote my kindergarten teacher a letter and said, "Dear Miss New, I do not belong here because I know a lot of big words." And then I spelled out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And were biblical characters, and I got removed. When I had a central moment growing up with my mother in Milwaukee after leaving Mississippi. My mother had said there would be no Christmas that year, and therefore there would be no Santa Claus. And I remember being embarrassed about having to go to school, because we all know that the Christmas, the holidays, is about going to school and saying what you got, and I got this. And so I was embarrassed about what I would tell, what would my story be. I wasn't so worried about not getting anything. I was worried about what the story was going to be for what I did or did not get. About midnight that night, Christmas Eve, some nuns showed up at our door. 3 nuns carrying baskets of food and toys for my half-sister and brother and myself. And I remember feeling relief. I felt not joy, but relief. And a sense of wonder that somebody who didn't know me would be able to figure out where we lived and come to our house with a turkey and food for Christmas, and managed to bring a Tammy doll for me, although I'd been wishing for Barbie. I never forgot that moment. And years later, when I was contemplating how I wanted to use my own resources, I thought about those nuns. So my first venture was to go to South Africa and to be able to do for other children, to create that experience that I'd felt for myself, that sense of wonder that somebody cared about me who didn't even know my name. Because I know that for me, it was more than the toys, it was more than the food. It was that somebody reached out and literally the energy of them touched the heart of me. So I wanted to do that. I also knew what a big role education had played in my life. And I always knew from the beginning of my success that I would have to find a way to give back. That's just a part of the way my grandmother raised me, that to those who much is given, much is expected. She never lived to see how much was given, but I was, taught to give back. So I started out and made a lot of mistakes because I think all of us go through the process of figuring out the difference between charity and true philanthropy. I made a lot of mistakes because I wanted to give. The heart of me knew that I wanted to have other people experience some of what I had experienced. But I wasn't quite sure of how to do it. So I made a lot of mistakes based on emotional giving. I tried to, when I first came to Chicago, I started my own Boys and Girls Club, taking young girls out of the inner city projects and trying to help them. I, at one point, was going to remove all of the, as many families as I could from the projects, and realized I had taken a family out. It's a funny story. I had taken a family out and was following one of the little boys. I got a notice from his school that he wasn't going to school, so I went to the home to say, "Why aren't you going to school?" And he said, "We be trying to get up every morning. We be trying, but we can't." And I said, "Why aren't you going to school?" Well, he says, we wait on the baby to wake up, and sometimes the baby doesn't wake up, and so then we're all late for school." And I said, "Well, what time do you set your alarm?" And he didn't know what an alarm was because they didn't have an alarm clock. So then I thought, well, my goodness, you can't really, one of those lessons was that you can't really create fundamental change in someone's life unless you change the way they think about their lives. So I started to think about all of these gestures of charity that I was doing were not really sustainable. They were emotional. They made me feel good and temporarily made somebody else feel good. But for long term, I started to think about what can I do?
When you created that long-term strategy, going from person to person and actually taking a step back, and how do you create scale? Mm-hmm. How do you leverage the most impact from each investment? Now when you look at opportunities, what's the lens you use to identify where and how you want to give, whatever the resource is?
Well, people refer to me as a brand now, the Oprah brand. I never knew what a brand was when I first started out. I didn't even know what that was. I became a brand by making every decision flow from the truth of myself. Every choice I made for every show that was going to be on the air, I made based upon, does this feel right? Does this feel right? Does this feel right? Is this going to help somebody? Is this going to help somebody? That's not going to help somebody. And I learned, my biggest teachers were people like the Ku Klux Klan and skinheads, because I was sitting on television one day doing an interview with the KKK. And I realized in that moment that the energy that I was broadcasting throughout the world was energy that I did not want to be a part of. And so I literally, in the middle of a commercial break, I just thought, I will never do this again. I will only allow my platform to be used for, as a force for good. And that there are many forms of the KKK, even if it's not called that. So I really made a conscious decision to use myself and to use the platform for that which I thought was going to enhance, enlighten people in a way. So that's the difference. In that moment, I stopped being used by television and made a decision to use television. And I do the same thing in terms of my philanthropic efforts. It's where do I feel that I can have the most impact or make the or do the most good. I had the great benefit of when we had done Christmas Kindness, which was truly an emotional decision. I want to go to South Africa. Hi. I want to go to South Africa, and I want to do for all of these kids what someone had done for me. I ended up being invited by Nelson Mandela to stay at his home for 10 days. And I was at first very intimidated because I'd said to my partner Stedman, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? I don't know what I'm going to talk about. For 10 days and 10 nights in Nelson Mandela's house. And Stedman said, why don't you try listening? And, oh, that's a marvelous idea. So I literally had the opportunity to, I thought I could have written a book called 29 Meals, because I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him for 10 days, and then on the last day, we didn't. But when I was there, at the end of my visit with him, or partially halfway through the visit with him, I got comfortable sitting and being with him. And he has, obviously, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and not afraid to ask people for money. Now, I'm not the kind of person who likes to just write checks. So I was trying to think, well, first of all, when you go to Nelson Mandela's house, what do you take? You can't bring a candle.
What did you take?
Yeah, what do you take?
Aside from a checkbook,
yeah, what do you take? So I was thinking of what I wanted to do, really, was to leave something that would be of value. So when we were talking one day in a conversation, and we got to the point where we were comfortable enough to sit in silence, that's how you know you made it. You can be in a room and don't have to say anything. We were just in the room reading the newspaper and started a conversation about what was in the paper, poverty and how to change it. And I said the only way to change poverty is through education. And one day I would like to build a school in South Africa. And he said, you want to build a school? Got up, called the Minister of Education, and by that afternoon I was in a meeting talking about building a school. So for me, education was the way in. I had thought long and hard about the mistakes that I'd made in the past. I realized that the only way to create long-term empowerment, long-term improvement and empowerment, and literally change the trajectory of somebody's life is through education. And you have to remove them from the environment, because I'd already had a program with young girls in the inner city and had failed because I couldn't take them out of the environment and didn't have the infrastructure. So the school for me was the way in, because I knew that education, taking a child out of their village, creating an environment for them where they have aspiration and can feel the spirit of themselves. And what I know is true is that true spirituality, the real spirit of every human being, is that part of ourselves which is drawn to hope, which is drawn to hope. And every one of us has that thing inside of us, that spirit that is drawn to hope. And that's what I wanted to do, was to create an environment where girls, and I chose girls because I am one, have been one, understand that, don't know nothing about boys. And I wanted them to feel the strength and power of hopefulness, that you can do and be and fulfill the possibility of your creation. So that's why I do what I do.
Taking such a meaningful stake with this endeavor was extraordinary. But you often talked about the fact that along the way, there were times where you wanted to give up. There were times where you didn't think the direction you pursued was the right direction. And there were times where you questioned your belief in how you decided to be a figure of impact. How do you respond to the critics and the skeptics? Is it different in the philanthropic world than in the business world?
I don't think it's any different. I think that how we all respond to negativity, and the more you know, I say all my mistakes are on the evening news, if I've done something wrong, and I can find it on the CNN crawl before anything. And now it's in the blogosphere, and so everything gets magnified and so forth. But the truth is, understanding the greater vision, purpose, and calling of whatever your philanthropic efforts are, holding on to what you really intended, what is the larger vision for what you're trying to do. It's what Stephen Covey has often called beginning with the end in mind. Holding the end in mind is what has gotten me through every crisis, either business or philanthropically. I know you're going to ask about the crisis at the school. Devastating to me when, after setting up this school, you want to ask me about it, or want me to just tell you?
I know that the crisis at the school was devastating for you. Mm-hmm. And I think so often when, as you just fed me the question, being the ultimate interviewer, I know how challenging that can be when it's your passion.
When you're trying to do good, I know you all have experienced that. You're trying to do a good thing. You know, everybody says no good deed goes unpunished. Well, it should not have to be punished for it. That's what I think. I don't like that phrase at all. Whoever made that up is...
What's the downside, though? Yeah. Your celebrity and your spheres of influence have been extraordinary catalysts for empowering change on mass millions around the world, but also how many people in this room have either appeared on Oprah's show, have collaborated in philanthropic endeavors, have been on her show to fuel their businesses?
Hi, Sarah.
Throughout the course of the day, about 15% of the room have been the benefactors of your platform. At the same time, it's sometimes a double-edged sword. What's the downside?
Well, it's all a double-edged sword. Regardless of who you are in this room, it's all a double-edged sword when you're in the business of giving out money, because people consider you to be in the business of giving out money, and that's how they see you. When I was going through the crisis at the school, there was one of the dorm parents was involved in sexual abuse. She was later acquitted, but I still believe the girls. First of all, never in all of my wildest imaginations in preparing for the school, we thought of everything, including knowing how devastating the crime situation can be in South Africa, electrifying all the fences around the borders and making sure that men were off the campus by a certain time at night. Never occurred to me or anyone, I think, that you would have abuse or charges of abuse from a female on campus. And so when that happened, there were lots of people who said, oh my goodness, okay, does this, destroy the dream? No, because I held on to what is the greater vision of that. What it taught me is that what everybody else in this room has had to learn or will learn, that the real key is not making emotional decisions, as I did with, I want to build a school, I want to help girls like myself, but starting with the infrastructure and the leadership that can sustain it long term. I think that's where the biggest mistakes have been made, particularly in Africa, is people have really hopeful ideas and they have really, altruistic visions, but if you don't create the system and put in the infrastructure and have the leadership, and in many cases you have to, as you know, Melinda, you have to train the people first in order to even begin to create the infrastructure. So we all go in with our big ideas and our great ideas, but if the platform hasn't been laid for long-term sustainability, and particularly, I would say, biggest mistake is leadership. You have to have people whose vision is not only aligned with yours, but they also carry the passion for the vision as you do. Not just, oh, I want to execute, or I just want to, work in this. You need people who are equally as passionate about it as you are. And when you can do that, then you at least have a chance
If the school was a very, very meaningful stake in the ground in terms of your passions and your legacy, you nonetheless are extraordinarily philanthropic across a number of different organizations. I'm really struck because you're very unique in the sense you reach millions and millions around the globe. And everyone is asking for your time, for your support.
And now tweeting for money.
Tweeting for money.
Tweeting for dollars.
So much so that I actually read that someone bought a billboard on your way to work to promote the Change with Puppy Mills.
Yeah.
I mean,
that actually worked, though. That worked.
It worked. Until everyone else started buying the
billboards. And then everybody else started buying billboards, but that doesn't work. But the first one worked.
Extraordinary measures to get your time. Attention,
yeah.
Whether it be through financially, through your presence, network, whatever it may be. I would love to know, how do you filter those opportunities? And what are the ones that just stand out to you that you may not have expected?
Well, I was confused, as I think a lot of people are, when you have more money than you actually know what to do with in the beginning. I was confused because I was an on-air presence, and because every dollar that I made and some that I didn't was broadcast, and regularly people thought they understood how much money I was making. People felt that I was an open target for asking for money. And in the beginning, when I first started my show, people literally would leave, women would leave their husbands and come sit on my doorstep in Chicago. And children would run away from home. And in the beginning, I couldn't figure it out because I didn't know how to say no. And I thought, well, I have it, so I can't say that I don't have it, which used to be the real truth. I don't have it. So I have it, so I can't, and I know everybody's faced this, particularly with your family. I have it, so I can't say that I don't have it. So how do I manage or figure out for myself what I can do, what I want to do, and what is going to be the most helpful? What I've learned is that my heart is my brand. So when I was in the process of building a brand and didn't even know it, as I said, I was led from the most truthful decision in the moment. And right now, when you see the work that I do carries the heart of me with it. So I had to make a conscious decision. I'd say, how can I best serve this person or these people or this group or this institution?
Did you depersonalize it a little bit in terms of your goal?
I always personalize it because that is my brand. For me, everything is personal. So if I'm thinking in terms of long-term sustainability, what I really want to do is I want to empower someone's life, because that's what was done for me. So I want to take what I've been given and to push that out into the world in such a way that I can pass that on, literally. So the decision comes from how am I going to be able to long-term create a difference in this person's life. That always, for me, comes back to education, because I know what it did for me. So I have a real strong charge with that, a real passion for that. And I think that for anybody who's in the business of developing their philanthropic reach in the world, it has to start with what you are most passionate about. What you give comes from how you want to give and also how you've been given to. So for me, I'm passionate about education. Nothing makes me happier in my work, still to this day, if there's something in our magazine and someone writes and says, I read this article and I never thought of it this way before. That's my favorite words. If I'm in the middle of an interview and someone says, I never thought of it that way before. To have that, what I call aha moment, or to be able to bring a piece of enlightenment to someone. And then to long-term have that piece of enlightenment, that aha, lead them on the path that most enhances themselves. That's what I'm looking for. So for now, what I understood was the building of the school was a way in for me to education. The reason why I'm excited about these kinds of gatherings is that the next level for me is to begin to collaborate with other people who do the work that I am doing, but do it better, have done it on a larger scale, because I'm not as interested in my name or brand, quote, being attached to it, as I'm interested in how do I affect a greater number of people, and for me, girls in particular.
When you talk about affecting a greater number of people, what are the different success metrics that you use in terms of identifying
lives changed,
the impact?
Lives changed. Lives changed.
Is that the number one?
Lives changed. You know, for years on my show, people would stop me in the street and they would say, "Oh, you changed my life, you changed my life." And when you hear that a lot, it starts to, you're like, "Oh, really? I changed your life." So I started turning it around to people to say, "All right, tell me how I did that." And then for the first few times, people were thrown, like, "Tell me how I did that." But to know that you've been able to do something that changed, as I said, my favorite word for the girls, and they love it, is the trajectory. Your life is going this way, and somebody comes along and makes an offering that can hit the core nerve, central nerve of your being, your existence, and changes the way you see yourself in the world. That's what I'm looking for.
You're in an extraordinary position, particularly in light of this larger room, in terms of your impact, in terms of the day-to-day conversation that you have with millions of everyday people through your show, through your radio programs, through all of the different entertainment platforms that you have. When you talk about how you change their lives, what are the different things that these touch points with your audience over the past 25 years, 25 years, how have they taught you to be a better philanthropist, and how can they teach all of us in this room to be better givers, better figures of impact?
Well, one of my goals when I was doing this show every day for 25 years, 2 shows a day, and now that I'm not doing it, I don't know how I did that. I look back and go, how did I do that for 2 shows a day? One of the goals for me was exactly what's happening at this conference, was to let the broader audience understand the power and impact of giving. So I created something on the air for 20 years that we call the Angel Network. And it was created simply to let people know that wherever you are in your life, whatever space you hold, whatever your status is, you have the power to give back from where you are and to use your life, because that's what all of our lives are for, to use your life as a force for something that is bigger than yourself. And that the law of nature that says what you put out comes back, that when you do that, and it comes from the center of yourself, not just from writing a check, or I'm going to do this because it looks good, or I'm going to show up in church, or I'm going to tithe, or whatever, but you do that from the center of yourself, that is what true humanity is all about. So I wanted to, you know, for me, anytime I get anything, and that's just the nature of myself. When I was a kid growing up poor and I'd get a candy bar, I would hold on to that candy bar until my cousins came. Because it's so much better if you could say, "Isn't this good? You want a piece?" Yeah, life is better when you share it. And, you know, that's for anything. Everything's more enjoyable if you can say, "Here, have some. Isn't that great?" And we get to talk about how great it is. So to be able to do that for millions of people, to say, which we did, I must say, we did that beautifully on the Oprah show for years. And every Monday we would give out a grant of $100,000 to someone in their community who was doing the good work. And that's everything from working with, you know, dogs, training dogs and giving them to veterans, or rocking babies who had been born drug addicted, finding people in their own spaces who were giving back in ways that really mattered. And what I know is you can be the kind of person who writes the biggest check, or the kind of person and think nothing else about it, and you do it because, you know, that's good for your portfolio, or it's good for your tax write-off or what. Or you can be the kind of person who doesn't have a lot to give, but reaches inside to the truth and the core of yourself, and you give that. And that person is rewarded exponentially. So that was the great gift, is to be able to teach people not just the art of giving, but the benefits of giving. As we all know, that the real reward comes from when you have true engagement in what it is that you choose to give. And I really do think that that is our purpose as human beings, is to use, and all of us in this room have been, you know, tremendously blessed beyond our imaginations. And so to be able to take that energy of yourself as a human being and to use it and to recognize it as an energetic force, not just money, not just writing checks, but as an how do I take this thing that you're doing down in Haiti? How do I take this passion that I have, this thing, and to use it as an energetic force for something that's greater than myself? That's what I'm always looking for.
And before we open it up to questions, I was very struck by a quote from you. You said, "The greatest thing about what I do is that I'm in a position to change lives. It's the most incredible platform for influence that you could imagine." Help us imagine, what's that like?
Well, it's
for someone whose spheres of influence and whose reach and impact is so diverse: policy, education, impacting daily lives. What's that experience like?
Well, I would say this. I think everyone in this room has experienced it to some degree. Because what I learned over the years in my 35,000 interviews with people, and still counting, is that there's a common denominator in the human experience. That whether I was talking to convict, I interviewed a father in prison who'd murdered his 2 daughters. I interviewed a group of women in Texas who'd all murdered their children. I've talked to victims of abuse. I've talked to people who've been through traumatic circumstances in their life, people who've had great victories in their life. I've talked to almost every celebrity you could imagine. And at the end of every single one of those interviews, in one form or another, each of them said this: "Was I okay? Was that okay?" I finished interviewing 5 men who all admitted to being child molesters and told in graphic detail how they lured children and seduced children. And it was really pretty profound, I would say, compelling. At the end of it, they said, "Was that okay?" At the end of Beyonce dancing on stage in all of her Beyonce-ness, she turned to me.
Later, right?
Yes.
You're gonna do it later for us.
She turned to me and said, "Was that okay?" So what I learned in all of those thousands of interviews is that there is a common denominator in our human experience. And when I go into any interview, no matter how intimidated I might be, or how, oh my gosh, I've never talked to this person before, I know that that's the line of truth that's running through. Everybody wants to know, did you hear me? And did what I say matter? And that's in your own personal relationships, that's with your children, that's every argument you've ever had is really about, are you hearing me? I'm sure somebody's actually said those words in this room. You don't hear me. Are you hearing me? So fundamentally, the desire to be heard, the desire to be validated, the desire to know that what you're doing is meaningful in the world is something that we all hold for ourselves. Just this past week on my network-owned I do something called Super Soul Sunday, and I was interviewing Carolyn Mace, who wrote a book called Anatomy of Spirit. And what's really exciting for me is that we were able to broadcast that not just on the cable platform, but to also blast it around the world. So we simulcast it around the world. So all around the world, people are tweeting in, thousands of people at the same time. And she said something that really hit a nerve. I knew it would hit a nerve with everybody because it hit a nerve with me. She was talking about how most people lead their lives following a course that is not their own, and that unless you can find the course that is truly your own, you will remain off course. And she was talking about how so many women betray themselves, and that when you betray yourself in relationships, regardless of what those relationships are, that you are no different than the person who hurt you. Now, that's just a simple little sentence. When you betray yourself, you're no different than the person who hurt you. Most of us in this room are cognizant of that. We're aware of that. But there's a whole world of people who are not. So what comes back to me is all these people who are tweeting, oh my God, I never thought of it that way before. That to me is the purest validation, because the reason why I wanted to do that show is so that people would feel and be able to discover a path to better themselves, a way to see themselves differently. And that one little phrase, when you betray yourself, you become no different than the people who hurt you. Open the door for that. So I, in that way, am validated because I'm very clear about what my purpose on earth is. I'm very clear that the work that I do on television is just a way of me manifesting myself as a vessel and a vehicle for the larger energy that I call God, for the larger universal purpose that I call God. That's what it is for me.